This is a production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.
This edition of Charlotte Cooks. I'm Chef Pamela Roberts, and I'm so glad you joined me today. We are going to be making some almond milk, and from the almond milk, we are going to be doing some almond milk cookies, which is really kind of nice because when you make almond milk, you always have some kind of a debris left, and this, instead of tossing it away, we are actually going to use it. So in order to make almond milk, one of the first things that we're going to need is some raw almonds. Now we want the almonds with the skins, and these are a particular kind of almond called a Marcona almond. The Marcona almond is a nice flat almond, and they come from Spain. They're beautifully white inside, but I'm going to show you how we're going to soak them, all right? It's important when you're making almond milk to soak your almonds first. And so for this recipe, we just use 1 cup of almonds, and this is a little more than 1 cup, but you just put them in a bowl. This is such a simple recipe. And then you take them and you cover them up with water. And you cover it up and just let it sit overnight, okay? And so when they sit overnight, they're going to end up looking like this. There's going to be a little bit of brown water in them, and they're going to be a little bit more plump, okay, than they were when they started. And at this point, we're going to take them, we're going to drain this water. Now, we're going to take this water and either throw it away. I think it's a good water to water plants with, so I save it and throw it on my plants. But there's nothing wrong with the water. We just don't want it in our almond milk. And so we're going to drain those almonds out, and what's going to be left is these lovely almonds like this. Now, why do we soak the almonds? A couple of reasons. We soak the almonds to get them soft and tender, so when we're making the almond milk, we can chop them up nice and fine and extract the milk from the almonds themselves. Another reason we soak them is it activates the growth enzymes within the almonds. Remember I said raw almonds, and so if I were to leave them in here, they would sprout and we could eventually grow a little almond tree from it. But all we're looking for here is an increase of nutrients. And so by adding the water and letting them soak, it actually activates those growth enzymes, which makes them a little bit more nutrient dense. Now, here's a fun little thing. If you didn't want to make almond milk with these things and you wanted to slip them out of their skins and roast them in the oven, here's all you have to do. Take them and squeeze it. You see? They just squeeze right out. They squeeze right out. Now, I'm saving these skins because I want that in my almond milk. Sometimes the almonds will separate, and that's okay, but I want to get a little close-up right here. This little close-up, look right here. This little bit right here is the sprout. And that's what's really, really, really kind of fun about sprouting almonds. I love almonds. Almonds are my favorite nut in the world. So, and this is actually just kind of fun to do. Sit here and just squirt them all out. And then you just take these and you just rub them in a little bit of salt and put them in an oven and roast them in the oven, and you have beautiful roasted almonds. What a great way of doing it yourself, right? So in order to make the almond milk, we're going to come over here to my blender. In my blender, I have 4 cups of water, and I have 1 cup of the almonds. They do look like a little more than 1 cup, and that's because they've all plumped up and everything, and I've just separated a bunch of the skins and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these almonds, and as I said, I've got 4 cups of water in my blender. Just going to put skins and all the way in here. Now, if you buy almond milk in the store, there's a really good chance that it's going to be sweetened or unsweetened, or even chocolate. It's really easy to do all 3. And I'm going to make a lightly sweetened flavor today because it's just really nice to have a little bit of a flavor inside of the almond milk. So let me put this bowl away. What we're going to do now is we're going to take medjool dates. Medjool dates are the nice big meaty ones. They're wonderful. You can get them in the grocery store. But you have to remember, you don't just take this date and plop it in there. This is going to add our sweetness, which is lovely because it doesn't have all that extra sugar. You got to get the pit out of the middle. Okay? There's a little pit about the size of an olive pit in the middle. So just break it. Let me show you how we do that. Drop it in there. You just take it and you smoosh it, and you'll feel that pit right there in the center. So take it out and put that on the side. Now, depending on how sweet you want it. For 4 cups, if you want it just mildly sweet, 2 dates is all you need. If you want it really sweet, only 4 dates, okay? It wouldn't go any more than 4 dates. You're going to add a tiny bit of vanilla. This is going to give you that vanilla flavored almond milk. You see that? That wasn't very much, like maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then we're going to put the lid on the blender. Now, let me give you a warning. If you have one of these high-powered blenders like this one, you don't want to crank it up all the way. If you've got a blender that's not such a heavy-duty puppy as this one, then you just want to turn it on and let it go. This is going to process for about 3 to 5 minutes, all right? And what's going to happen is it's going to grind everything up, and what you're looking for in the liquid is a nice, fine consistency, all right? So here's some noise. Okay, so it's been about 3 to 5 minutes now. Here's our almond milk. He's all done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here. And you want a really fine wire mesh strainer for this. The larger your mesh in the strainer, the more of this debris is going to fall through the strainer. The finer your screen, the more thin consistency your almond milk is going to be. Now, if we compare this to whole milk and cream and that kind of thing, if you were to use this as a whole milk, you want a little bit more debris in there. If you like it more like and I just love a big old glass of almond milk, and I don't want it to be really thick, so I like to take it and strain out as much of this debris as possible. Okay, so you put it in a strainer. You see, look at the milk's coming out. It's beautiful. And you press up against the side of the screen with a spatula and press all that milk out, okay? Now, you can also see that sometimes you're going to get a little bit of the almond bit coming through the outside of the screen, and that's okay, because that's going to give a little bit of body to your almond milk, okay? So once you get this all pressed through, and it's all nice and dry like this, okay? We're going to take this, we're going to set it aside, right like that, because we're going to use that debris. We're going to take our milk, we're going to put it in a nice pitcher, and we're going to get it in the refrigerator and get it nice and cold. Now, something you have to remember about almond milk is it will separate on you as it sits. Look at that milk. Doesn't that look awesome? Wait till you taste it. Wait till you taste it. Now, why are people drinking almond milk instead of drinking cow's milk? Well, there's a lot of dietary theory out there right now that is claiming to give up dairy, to give up gluten and all these other things. Well, there's no gluten in this, and there is no dairy in this because it's nuts, water, dates, and vanilla. Okay, so now that we have our almond milk made and our almond milk is in the refrigerator and we have our debris all separated here, I'm just going to go ahead and dump it out of here and put it into a bowl so we can go ahead and start making our cookies. What we're going to use for our cookies, very, very, very typical cookie stuff: eggs, butter, sugar, almonds. We're going to add some dried cranberries and some vanilla to this, and all of our almond debris too. So we're going to get started by adding our butter and our sugars to the bowl. And I think I'll use a spatula to get it out. There we go. And we're using 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 3/4 a cup of white sugar. And we're just going to put this in the mixer and bring this together. As soon as it comes together, what we're going to do is we're going to add our eggs, 2 eggs, okay? And eggs, we're using large eggs. Hold on for a moment. We're going to get some noise. All right. As this all comes together, once you see that your sugar and your butter have combined, we're going to add our eggs, all right? And you could try to let them slip in one at a time if you can. And if they all go in at once, that's okay too. But there we go. And there we go. We're going to add our vanilla. We're using about a teaspoon of vanilla. It's all in the recipe. So the recipe you can find on our website. And turn this down. Turn it off. Scrape your bowl down. Now, I don't know how many of you are bakers out there, and I'm definitely not what you'd call a baker, but I do love to make cookies. One of the things you have to remember to do while you're doing this is to scrape your bowl down. And the reason you do that is so that everything gets incorporated and nothing is left on the bottom or on the sides. I'm going to take my flour, and to my flour I'm adding a little bit of salt. I'm adding a little bit of baking soda. Now, sometimes when you make cookies and muffins and different kinds of breads and things, when you add fruit and nuts to them, they have a tendency to sink to the bottom. And the reason they sink to the bottom is because there's really nothing stopping them from sinking. And so I like to add my cranberries and my nuts, and if I'm using chocolate chips or anything like that, I add them to my flour too. Why? Because it gives them a coating, and that keeps them from sinking to the bottom. Somehow or another, the flour that's coating the nut or the fruit or whatever it is you have in your flour sort of gives it a little glue, so wherever it is in the cookie, it will stay there instead of dropping down, okay? So before we add our flour, we're going to add our almond debris. Okay, so we're just taking our 1 cup of almond debris and we're dropping this in. And I call it debris because it is the leftover. But you know, shoot, like I said, it's just dates and vanilla and almonds. So, you know, why wouldn't you put that in a cookie? It's really a delicious thing. So we're going to mix that in. And then we're going to add our flour. So now I'm going to add my flour. And I'm going to turn my machine off and I'm going to put a little bit in. And try not to get it all over the place. There you go. Get it in there. I'm going to put about half of it in, maybe a third of it in, and start stirring it in. And as it gets incorporated, I'm going to add the rest of it. I'm going to add the rest of it. Next, I'm going to put these onto a cookie sheet. You want to make sure that your dough is well mixed. So always at the very end, you want to get down in the bottom of your pot and make sure that it's all incorporated. Now, an ice cream scoop. This is some of the best pieces of equipment that you could have in your kitchen. You can use it for ice cream, you could use it for all kinds of things. I love these things and I have them in lots of different sizes. But for cookies, you can't beat it. Why? Because you're going to get a consistent sized cookie every single time. So, I'm going to take your cookie dough, and when you do this, I press it up against the side so I get a nice, even, consistent sized cookie, okay? And if you're not sure how they spread, now I've done this a few times, so I kind of sort of know how they spread. If you weren't sure how they spread, I would go ahead and put them in the oven and bake one off so you could see how far apart you have to place them on the sheet. I usually like to bake about a dozen cookies on a sheet like this at a time. So we'll do 6, and there we go, okay? I've had some people talk to me before about almonds when they're talking about, you know, well, almonds, we hear that they have cyanide in them. Well, that is true to a point, but not sweet almonds, and these are sweet almonds. We have bitter almonds. Bitter almonds are known to have a cyanide compound in them. And you don't want to eat that, and you don't want to have that. So don't let anybody tell you that all almonds have cyanide in them, because that's not true. The sweet almonds are perfectly safe to eat, and there is no cyanide whatsoever in that almond. So we've got quite a bit of dough. We usually can get about 3 dozen cookies out of this. So I'm going to take them, I'm going to put them in the oven. I put them in the oven at about 375 degrees and let them bake for usually about 12 minutes. Sometimes they may take a little bit longer. Now, there's something I want to tell you too. If you wanted to make a different kind of cookie, I'll show you over here. We have these, you can see the darker ones here. All I've done with this is I've added some cocoa powder to it. So if you wanted to get 2 kinds of cookies out of your batch, you can go ahead and do 1.5 dozen of the plain and then add some cocoa powder to this mix like I've done here, and then you can have some chocolate ones as well. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk to you now about how to select some quality pots and pans for your kitchen. I get asked all the time, can't I go buy those pots and pans that we use in a restaurant? Well, yeah, you can, but they're really not what you really want to have at home, and I'm going to show you why. Usually when we're dealing with something that is for a restaurant, we're dealing with something that looks like this. This is made out of solid aluminum. The aluminum is a really good thing to choose for pots and pans because it dissipates the heat evenly, but if you put acid products in this, you're actually getting aluminum into your food. What we use at home for the same style of pot and pan is this. This is a wonderful, well-made pot. This will eventually get beat up. And I looked around the kitchen to try and find some things that we can show you how they get beat up. They get dented. You can see they get burned. They get all kinds of things. And they're not perfectly round right now because of the way they get thrown around in the kitchen. And they're designed to get used up and thrown away. In the kitchen, we go through these like crazy. You can see all the dents in the bottom of this. See all that happening? And all of this stuff, get the rounded bottoms on them because these are all made out of aluminum. See how the oil and the fat stick to the bottom and they burn and you never really quite get them clean enough. That's really not what you want to have at home. In the restaurants, we go through these things. We buy pots and pans brand new all the time. At home, you don't want to do that. You want to make a quality investment that's going to last you. If you buy real quality, you can pass these things down to your children so they can last for generations. Now, one thing you want to look at is something that would have layers. Now, the construction will tell you whether it's layers. Now, this one has copper and aluminum on the inside, and it's surrounded with stainless steel, which means it doesn't just have the copper or the aluminum on the very, very bottom. It's all the way up to the top and sandwiched into this whole pot. So you're going to get the even heating all around. The other thing you want to look at is the handle. If the handle is solid onto the pot, like this one is, this handle is going to heat up a lot quicker than a handle that has a little bit of a flare in it at the end. You also want to look for a handle that's got some good solid rivets on it, that's held very, very firmly to the inside of the pot and the outside of the pot. You also want to see if it has something to hang it up with, because when you buy really nice pots and pans, you end up getting a pot rack, you hang all these up because you kind of like want to show them off, okay? When you're buying a set, you want to find a lid that fits nice and tight. And personally, I really like finding kinds that have glass lids because then you can take a look at it and see, is the water already gone from the rice instead of having to lift it up and check? That way you can look and see how your cooking is going without having to lift the lid and lose any heat or any steam. Another thing you might want to look at is a good non-stick frying pan, and you want a non-stick frying pan not for everyday cooking but for things like eggs and omelets and things that are kind of delicate. You can use these pots and pans very, very easily. You can see the disc that is on the bottom of this pan. This is different than this pan. This is all clad on the inside. The entire pan is clad with the copper and the stainless steel and the aluminum sandwiched all inside of here. This is an example of a pan that has a disc on the bottom of it. Can you see that? It's just, you could see it, you could feel it, okay? So when you go and you're looking for your pots and pans, you want to pick them up, you want to feel them, you want to see that they feel good in your hand. You don't want to have something that's really lightweight because when you put it on the heat and you turn that heat up to high and you walk away, whatever's in your pan is going to really burn much, much faster than when you have a solid heavy bottom or an all-clad bottom like these. These will be more forgiving in your cooking and you'll burn fewer things than you would if you bought cheap, thin pans that don't cost a lot of money. When you invest in a set, get a basic set so you have a stock pot, a couple varieties of pans, a couple varieties of pots with lids that could be interchangeable to different things, and that will last you a good long time. It will last you for years and generations as long as you wash them. One last tip I'm going to give you about your pots and pans, don't put them in the dishwasher. And if you happen to buy those kind that are black on the outside, putting them in the dishwasher will remove that anodized from the outside and you'll end up with like a really pale, white, ashen looking thing. So some good points for starting off and buying a selection of pots and pans that are going to last you for a lifetime. I want to show you how you can get the two cookies out of here. So now we've got our dough, and what we're going to do is we are going to add a little bit of cocoa powder to this. Cocoa powder, well, how much? We're going to add a 1/4 cup. So what you can do, since you get about 3 dozen cookies out of this, you can scoop out a dozen, dozen and a half of cookies. You just might want to do this for the whole batch if you want. If you're going to do the whole batch, use a 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. I like using the darkest cocoa powder I can find. And I'm just going to add a little bit of cocoa in there. And I'll move this over. And I'm going to put everything back on the mixer and just mix this in, okay? So, there we go. And cookie making can always be so much fun. It can be messy. We like messes in the kitchen. Okay, here we go. Put that on there like that. So we got our cocoa powder in there. Now be prepared, because when you start this, it could go whoosh, and you get cocoa powder all over the place. Okay? So here's something you can do to prevent that from happening. Take a nice clean towel and just spread it over here until it gets started. Okay? Okay, so now that we've got that cocoa powder all mixed in, one of the things you want to watch for is still the blonde cookie mix that perhaps didn't get mixed in. You will see some of the white in there because we do have almonds. And that's just normal, isn't it? Okay. So once you can get that off the beater, and take it off, I'm going to scoop it up, and I'm going to show you the inside of this bowl here in just 1 second. I'm going to get another sheet pan. And if you notice, my sheet pan is lined with parchment paper. My parchment paper is there to help prevent the cookies from sticking. And if you didn't want to use parchment paper, or you didn't have parchment paper, you can use silicone baking sheets, or just brush it with a little bit of olive oil or something. Now, we are going to have a little bit of the blonde cookie mix on here, so we can almost get like a marble look on the cookie. It's not going to be all over, and it's not going to be very much, but sometimes, especially with this little creative look we're doing here, we can get a little bit of the marble look. And then we can go all the way for the chocolate. Once again, space them. There's a nice little marble. Space it so you have room for 6 on one side of the sheet pan and 6 on the other side of the sheet pan. And remember, they're not going to rise up a whole lot, but they do create the nice little domes. And with the chocolate, you know what's really, really good to put on the chocolate? Sprinkle it with a little bit of salt. I know that sounds weird, but you hear the salted caramel, you hear of all those salted things. It is so good on this. It is so absolutely good on this. And there we go. And remember, when you're doing this, to take your little scoop and press it up against the side of the bowl so you get nice, even cookies. Okay? Just like that. And once again, if you want to put some of the icing, the drizzle icing on there at the end, you certainly can. Do you have to? No. And if you put salt on top of them, it looks like little crystals all shining. It's wonderful. There we go. Another dozen cookies ready to go in the oven, and I got another dozen left. So 3 dozen out of this batch. Put them in the oven. 375, just like the other ones, for about 12 minutes. So when they come out of the oven, they're not going to spread a whole lot. They get these beautiful domes on them. And one way you can tell whether they're done is press it down and it'll feel firm. It's not going to indent at all, but it'll feel nice and firm. And when it feels firm, that cookie is done, okay? So now we're going to take these cookies, we're going to put them on a plate. You're going to also see that something else I've done is I've drizzled a little bit of the fondant icing on the top, and I've left some of them without the icing on them, just in case someone didn't want to have the extra icing. So we're going to put them on the plate. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to eat them. And we're going to eat them up with a great big glass of fresh almond milk. It's so good. When you do the almond milk, folks, make sure you chill it down really well. Gee, how many cookies am I going to eat? Not that many. So I think I'm just going to put these over here. I'll leave these on here since they're not frosted. Put the rest of these on here so people can help themselves. Could you add other things to these? You could. Do you have to add extra nuts to them? No. Can you put oatmeal in them? Yes. But the whole point of this is to have another way of serving the almond debris after you make your almond milk, so you don't have to throw that away, because it's such good stuff. It's such really good stuff, okay? So here's some cookies. Let me pour a glass of almond milk. We'll see what that looks like, okay? Now, remember that I told you that the almond milk will separate, all right? So if you put it in a nice big glass pitcher, you're going to be able to see, as it sits, you're going to be able to see it starting to separate a little bit. And that's normal. That's one of the reasons you can't see through the containers when you buy commercial almond milk. And I love this really so much because it doesn't have the extra ingredients. Sometimes the commercial almond milk will have ingredients in it that'll keep it from separating, which I don't necessarily think is something that we need to have in our diets. So here we go. Ooh, look at that nice big fresh glass of almond milk. And I'm going to put the rest of it in here. There we go. We're going to serve this up, milk and cookies. There you go. How could you get any more comfort home food than that? So I hope you enjoy the almond milk. I hope you enjoy the almond cookies. And come up with some other ways to use that almond debris. I was thinking of mixing it with some water and flour and making like an almond cracker. Will that work? I'm not sure. I've only gotten as far as the cookies so far, and I can't get past the cookies. The family keeps saying, more cookies, more cookies. So every time I make almond milk, I gotta make more cookies. What a hardship. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Charlotte Cooks. You can find the recipes for this on pbscharlotte.org, or if you want to email me, I'll be more than happy to send you the recipe as well. My email is Pamela, P-A-M-E-L-A, .roberts, R-O-B-E-R-T-S, @cpcc.edu. I love to hear from you, so please don't hesitate. I always have time to respond, and I just really like hearing from the viewers. Try the cookies, try the almond milk, save yourself some chemicals, have some real natural almond milk, avoid the dairy, and feel how much better you feel by having the almond milk. Thanks for watching this episode of Charlotte Cooks, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
A production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.